Is your life simple or is it complicated? If you're like most people, you probably tend to overcomplicate things. I know I sure do. We do it by collecting too much stuff, paying attention to too many things, or trying to do too much. It's actually much easier to overcomplicate things than it is to edit our lives and get down to the basics of what really matters most. My guest today says the first step to a more stress-free life is to stop overcomplicating things. And Joe Calloway is going to show us how to do it on today's One Simple Thing podcast.
It's time to build a better business by building a better you. This is One Simple Thing.
Welcome back to the show. It's Dave Kirby with you as we head into another exciting interview here. Joe Calloway joins me. He's been a previous guest on the show a couple of years ago, and I'm really excited to have Joe back on the program today. Before we get started, I'd like to invite you once again to take part in our GoFundMe campaign to generate some support for One Simple Thing, just to help pay the bills. I've been pretty much footing the cost of this podcast for the last 2.5 years out of my own pocket. Would like to make that not so, if you know what I mean. So we're asking you, if you enjoy One Simple Thing, to make a donation of any size to our GoFundMe account. You can do that by going to donate.onesimplethingonline.com and make your donation today. Again, it's donate.onesimplethingonline.com. Let's get on with the show. Joe Calloway joins me. For 30 years, he's been a business author, coach, and speaker. He's a member of the National Speakers Association Hall of Fame. His latest book is called Keep It Simple. It's available by clicking on the banner ad when you go to onesimplethingonline.com. Let's get at it. Joe, thank you for being with me on today's One Simple Thing.
Dave, it's a pleasure. Wouldn't be anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm so grateful. We've had you on the show before, and with all your wisdom, I knew you had more to share. So you have a book out called Keep It Simple, right? Unclutter your mind to uncomplicate your life. Tell us about the book.
Well, Dave, it's different than all my other books. My other books are just kind of standard format, business books, couple of hundred pages. This one, in keeping with the title, Keep It Simple, it is a very simple little book. It's only about 90 pages. I mean, you can read the thing. Somebody asked me if they could read it on an airplane. I said, you could read it on a flight from Atlanta to Nashville.
Yeah. You could read it before you take off.
Yeah, exactly. But I tell you, I'm really tickled with the response that it's getting. It's been a fun book for me. And I think the reason that it's the most fun is because people are getting in touch with me saying, hey, I used this idea, or, this is exactly what I needed to hear. And so it's just some good, real basic principles and ideas about how simplification can be a huge boost to your productivity, to reducing stress, to all sorts of things.
What prompted you to write the book? Are there personal experiences or just what you've noticed around you?
I tell you what it was. In my live presentations, I do a lot of speaking to corporate groups. And in my live presentations, whenever I would talk about, actually, there's a question that I will ask. And particularly when I had leadership groups, I would say, how many of you have this thought frequently? And the thought is, I think I'm making this way more complicated than it needs to be. Every hand in the room would go up. And so I knew that idea was striking a chord with my live audiences when I talked about it. And about that time, a publisher contacted me, not my usual publisher, but a different publisher, and started talking about ideas for a book. And we came up with this Keep It Simple idea, and he said, go with it. And so I did.
Well, let's talk about that idea that we overcomplicate things. Why do we have a tendency to do that in our lives? I mean, I think probably on a philosophical level, we all know simple's better. KISS, keep it simple, stupid, Yeah. And yet we always tend to want to overcomplicate things.
And let me tell you something. I think that's why I got to write the book. Is because I'm guiltier than anybody out there. Oh my gosh, Dave. If there's a way to complicate something or overthink it, I'm your man, because I tend to overthink everything. Although I must say I've gotten better in the last couple of 3 years because I've been paying attention to it. But quite frankly, I think one of the biggest reasons we overcomplicate is because it's easier to make things complicated than it is to make things simple. It's it's just easier. Anybody can make things complicated. And that's where I think our natural tendency lies.
You know, I've learned that at least a little bit in my career in radio and production, because, you know, when you got to write a 30-second spot, that's not a lot of words, right? And you got to communicate an idea in 30 seconds. There's a lot of editing that has to go on, and trimming the fat of what you're trying to communicate. And it's much more difficult to transmit an idea in 30 or 60 seconds than it is to sit down and write something that might take you 5 or 10 minutes to say the same thing.
It is. You know, Mark Twain, one of his famous quotes is that he wrote a long letter to a friend. And at the end of it, he said, if I'd had more time, this would have been a shorter letter, which is exactly what you were just saying. Yeah. It takes time and thought to edit your to-do list down, to edit your priorities down, to edit a 30-second spot down. But I tell you, in the interest of getting the most out of your time, it's really essential to simplify. And I think it really applies to people with their businesses, and it triple applies to people in leadership positions.
You know, one of the things that I've noticed in my own life is that if you're truly productive with your day, if you really are focused and you're really paying attention to the things that matter most, we're used to this idea of a 40-hour work week, you know? And it was kind of drilled into us by our dads or our parents or whatever. You know, they come from the generation where they went to work 9 to 5, or they put in the day at the factory or on the job or whatever. And sometimes when we do work that matters and we're doing it efficiently, it doesn't take as much time as we might think. And so we feel a little bit guilty about not working as many hours as other people do. Have you noticed that?
Well, we do. And you know, I grew up in a family, my dad, and this is a double-edged sword. I'm very thankful for it. On the one hand, he really imbued in me a very strong work ethic. But eventually that translated to, if the sun is up, I need to be working.
Yeah.
I need to be out there. And I think what we do is we confuse activity with productivity. And we think that being busy means we're being productive. And it doesn't necessarily. It could be that being busy is what's getting in your way.
Well, that's an interesting thought. So you talk in the book about the price we pay for overcomplicating things. Can you kind of cover that for us?
Well, there's a client that I've got that I worked with. He's the CEO of a company called New Farm, which is an agricultural product company out of Australia. And something he said to his senior leadership group, I was sitting in the meeting, really struck me. He said, you know, the price that we pay for overcomplicating things is immeasurable. And then he went on to talk about how it makes for bad decisions. It scatters our efforts. It's just we pay a huge price for overcomplicating. And then the flip side of that, and I think the absolute guru of simplification was Steve Jobs of Apple, who said, he said my mantra has become simplicity and focus. It takes a lot of really hard work to get your thinking clean enough to make things simple. But it's worth the work, because if you can make things simple, you can move mountains. And I just think that speaks volume and really is a great job of editing down the importance of simplicity.
You know, it's interesting, too, that since Steve Jobs died, I mean, to me, it's kind of instructive of the fact that it's not something that comes naturally to everybody, because you see Apple in some ways losing that commitment to simplicity, right?
Yeah, I think they may be a little bit. And the thing is, that's their claim to fame is sometimes I'll ask an audience, I'll say, give me a word or a phrase that you would use if you are an Apple customer to describe Apple products. And the vast majority of them will use the word simple. They're easy to use and they're simple. And that's what gives them such great utility, which then gives them such great value, is because they're not complicated. They're almost intuitive to use. And yeah, Jobs was just, I mean, he was the king of making things simple.
Yeah. So how do we start? narrowing down our choices and looking to simplify our lives. And this really is something that it does not just entail our business, but really is a part of our personal lives, our relationships, and everything else that we're doing in our lives, right?
Yeah, I think it really is. And I think the starting point is simply to identify, and we can talk more about the how-to in a few minutes, but I think step one is to say, okay, where do I need to simplify? And it might be your schedule. Listen, it might be your schedule beyond work. It might be your social calendar that's driving you crazy and you're thinking, that's where I need to simplify. It could be your closet, your refrigerator. It could be in the area. Oh my gosh, you name it. Relationships, finances, overcommitments in general. But I really think that it's worth the time for people to sit down and say, okay, where do I need to simplify? And then you come up with your kind of your action plan on how to do it. But the first step is, where do I need to do it?
If I don't know, I'm thinking there might be some people going, yeah, that's all well and good for you, Joe, but I've got all this stuff and it's all important, right? So how do we just start with something? I was thinking as you were talking a few minutes ago about your closet or whatever, I notice sometimes just if you clean out the refrigerator, I get there's almost like an endorphin boost or something, right? It's like
totally
a sense of accomplishment. You open that refrigerator and it just looks clean and there's not all the junk in there and the leftovers and everything. It feels good. So do we just start with something and get ourselves on the path to knowing what it feels like to simplify?
I think you do. And I think what you just described, I'm dead serious here. I think that's a perfect metaphor for what it feels like in your life and in your work. When you start to, because you can't, look, I'm just going to draw a line in the sand. If you're saying, but it's all important, no, it's not. You've got to start to prioritize and understand the difference between what is truly essential, truly important, and what is less important. And if you can't do that, then I'm sorry, you're stuck. You're going to be stuck in an overcomplicated life forever. It's like going in your closet and saying, I haven't worn this for 3 years. And then that little voice says, yeah, but I might. And I paid $300 for it. I don't care. Take it to Goodwill. If you haven't worn it in 3 years, get it out of there.
But I might lose weight, Joe.
Yeah. Well, then reward yourself by going and buying something new.
But, I think that just speaks to our need to try and overcomplicate things. It's like we're looking for excuses not to simplify. So our one simple thing for today, you want us to identify 3 areas of our life that we want to simplify. So can you kind of give us some advice on how we can narrow it down to those 3 areas?
I think one logical place to go is just, well, there's two approaches and you can combine them, Dave. One is what you just said a minute ago, which I really love, which is just start with something manageable and easy and even tactile, physical, like the refrigerator or the closet, as mundane and trivial as that might seem, or your desk, for Pete's sake. There are people that every time they sit down at their desk, they go, now where is that fill in the blank? Instead of being able to go, I know exactly where everything is. And listen, you might have the messiest desk in the world and you know where everything is, and that's fine. That may just be the way you operate. So one, find a place where it would be easy. And then I think the second thing is look where you're experiencing the most stress, or where you know that it's getting in your way. I would start there with one and or both of those.
Yeah, that's good advice. Joe, thank you. The book, again, is called Keep It Simple, Unclutter Your Mind to Uncomplicate Your Life. We will talk about how you can get a copy of the book here in just a second. But, Joe, thanks for being with us today.
My pleasure.
I appreciate Joe taking the time to share his wisdom with us, wisdom generated over 30 years as an author, a coach, and a speaker. And if you'd like to pick up his latest book, it's called Keep It Simple. You can click on the banner ad. You'll see it on the right side of the page when you go to onesimplething.online.com. And I appreciate you supporting the show. Again, if you want to donate to our GoFundMe campaign, just go to donate.onesimplething.online.com. You can do that today, and I'd sure appreciate it. Hey, everybody. I'll talk to you next time. Got Joe Calloway coming back. We'll again be talking about concepts from his book, Keep It Simple. I'm Dave Kirby, and thanks for listening to the One Simple Thing podcast.